Okay, so we're back with part 2 of the 1901 Commonwealth of Australia Constitution. Very contentious. Obviously I left off making a pretty big claim. So now we're going to dig deeper into that. So please go back to the first one before you can understand this one. So we talked about how if Parliament is meant to be public servants, how can they write their own punishment? You know, what's the purpose of doing that? And so what I'm alluding to is that if you can now fool the people to believe you have authority, which you're only meant to be a system of service. So all that really means is that it's not government. That's the trick. The people are the government, because government means to control. So the people need to control a bunch of other people who are a lot less than they are on how they're going to do their jobs. That's why they're called servants, and the servants of us, we the public. So they can't write their own rules about what's going to happen to them. As soon as they do that, they are your master. And like I said to you in the last one, they actually made sure that they were actually immune from any of these things they wrote down. So that the idea of that is to trap you to believe that you, now if they can write punishment for themselves, then they can write punishment for you too. The only difference is that there's two rules here, right? It's a double standard. It's do as we say, but not as we do. That's what really is happening here. And think about in reality, how many of them ever been punished for their misdeeds? It's never happened. Because what? They granted themselves what am I trying to say? Immunity from prosecution, right? That's not a servant. A servant is not immune from prosecution. So they've already elevated themselves into a ruling class. And anyone who attaches this, that's what you're granting authority to. So let's listen on to what Tim says. If I can get it to play.
No, I'm telling you, this has been going on for 30 years, at least 30 years. And every public official, everybody that's sat in Parliament for 30 years comes under there. The Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1901 Clause 5 is operation of the Constitution and laws. This Act and the laws made by the Parliament of the Commonwealth under the Constitution.
Okay, there it is right there, guys. You see what a public servant has granted itself? It's granted itself the right that no one other individual has, but to rule and dominate you through what? Because the way you know who has control is those who have the power to punish. So they set an act, which is a pantomime. Right? That's all an act is. They created this ritual, and now once they've done this ritual, right, now gives them immediate power to what? It says all laws made, so like they can now all of a sudden make a law by Parliament of the Commonwealth under what? The Constitution. So now they're saying, well, look, there's this bit of paper that you guys all voted for, and what we're saying is if you want that, that means that you need to let us and be okay with us dictating how things are going to go. It says shall be binding on what? The courts, the judges. So what we say goes. Your entire system of punishment, of how you assess whether there's been a violation to someone, we own it. Like it's telling you right there in your face, guys. And it covers the entire area, like the whole, from coast to coast, right? They've just now immediately granted themselves, like you are now looking at a communist manifesto. That's what you guys are actually giving your life force energy into, and I'm going to show you how, right? But to understand why it's a communist manifesto, if you haven't figured it out by now already, then you need to understand the difference between individualism and collectivism, and that's what we're going to look into now.
Not the green book, the red book, under the Constitution.
So remember I said from the beginning, if you watch the first one, you get two books. One is supposed to be fraudulent, you're supposed to be able to figure it out, so then you think, oh yes, well that's the fraudulent one, I've uncovered the secret, ha ha ha. That means this one's the legitimate one. Without understanding principle, guys, you're never going to find out how the fraud is done. So it's about understanding principle, that the government is the people. There is no little cabal, a ruling class, that has lawful authority to govern anyone, because that's slavery. And that's what was this country set up for? To be a prison colony, right? To what? Extract minerals and resources, you know, to be used for that. And they needed to find a way to do it to actually, you know, dismiss the population that was already here. So this is how they did it, right? So it's all there in your face if you want to see it. But they needed to have some reason to do it. If they just showed up with their ships without actually having any, like, you know, mental construct, they would justify it in their own minds, not for the local population. They knew what was going on, but to themselves, right? So they can, because if you're brought here and forced, and then you understand that the reason how you got here is just to be like a good slave that's going to do the dirty work for your master and start helping killing off the population. If you knew that that's what you were here to do, your moral conscience wouldn't allow you to actually action that out. It just wouldn't. So they had to create a very good, well-concealed mind construct to have people believe that this is, what they want. And that's what voting for this whole thing, has done. It's made sure that people believe that this is what they were given. But in actual fact, it's no different to when you want to get an airline ticket. You click online, you've got the choice of clicking on the terms and conditions or not having a flight. So that's what they did. That was a corporation from the beginning. It operates under the same structure. It grants you the choice of having it or not having it. But if you want it, it's under our terms. Think about it. It's all there in plain sight if you want to see it. So I'm just going to keep playing, and we're going to get to the next video that starts talking about individualism and collectivism.
Shall be binding on the courts, the judges, and the people of every state and of every part of the Commonwealth, notwithstanding anything in the laws of any state.
So there you go. It's right there in front of you, right? They've just made themselves absolute. Now we're going to go look into individualism and collectivism. I'm just going to have to turn the volume down because this was really soft, but the next one's really loud.
Individualism versus collectivism. Now this is the key to it.
Now just before I go ahead, I just want to say this is Will Keat. He's not the sole reason, but he's, what would I say? When I was going down this road of understanding truth and fact and fiction, when I came across his work, that inspired me to create Soundbite University, because I knew what he created. If you don't break it down into little bite-sized chunks, you're not going to understand it. So that's what inspired me. So he has a very unique gift, and that is to aggregate really complicated material and then break it down into simple everyday language so everyone can understand. That's why I love his material, and that's why I'm putting it up today.
This is all about the difference between two opposite ideologies. If any of you have studied any of the Mark Passio material with natural law and other things, you'll be familiar with this. Now, one of the things that he says is that most of the opposites in society, where we're divided, by age, sex, all the different things that they kind of cause problems with in society, divide and rule. All of those things are fictions. They're not true. Okay, but there is one thing, there is one divide that is absolutely real in the universe. And it's the two ideologies of individualism and collectivism. So we'll get into that now. So, free thinking and free will. What do I mean by that? That is the fundamental aspect of the individual in the universe. At the divine level, we are free-thinking individuals and we have free will. Okay, and we'll get on to free will in a minute, but what that really is we have the free will to go in alignment with natural law, that's the laws of the universe, to be in alignment with it, or not, as the case may be. Okay? We have that freedom. And we're also fundamentally self-determining, and we're interested in our self-improvement, and it's from that we get fulfillment. There's a kind of meaning to our lives, ultimately, at the individual level, because we get some kind of fulfillment from the fact that we are self-determining and we're interested in a general idea of us making tomorrow better than today kind of thing. It's that idea. But we've been taught that individualism is it perhaps selfish, or it's at least been suggested to us that you're just thinking about yourself. Okay, and we need to be aware that that isn't the case, because as individualists, we recognize that other people, and we delight in other people's successes as individuals as well. Yeah? So we want the best for others.
Now I'm just going to pause it there. I want you to really now think deeply and honestly how many people, including yourself, really delight in the success of others. If you're really honest with yourself. So that shows you if you really are in that space where you care about individual rights and the experience of the individual, or you've been well programmed to actually resent other people and not see them as an individual who's another life force expression of yourself. So you would want to protect in them that which is precious and sacred to you. How many people really see the world through that lens? Very minute number. And that's what that legislation, when you saw that called itself law, is all about, making a one-size-fits-all, right? Because they grant themselves the authority to say, well, if you commit these crimes, it's 2 years. Without even question, it's just that what it is. Instead of actually going, well, why don't we get the people to think about, well, what's the specifics of what each individual's done, the full context of it, and then the people can set what they desire, what they can see as being a fair outcome on an individual basis, not a one-size-fits-all. And what does legislation do? It's always one-size-fits-all, which is collectivism. We're all treated as one big herd of cattle, that there's no distinction between us, right? There's no individual situational context that needs to be taken into consideration. So, that each of us, if you think about it, and what he's saying is we all want to be seen and heard for who we are in our specific, unique experience. That's the true nature of freedom. And those things they call constitutions have no regard for that. Because the Constitution has no business getting involved in the individual's life. None. Because all it is supposed to be is what? It's meant to be the limits of the power granted to a system that's meant to be a support organisation, not a government, a support organisation to assist the people's quality of living. That's what it's supposed to be. And that's why we're getting into individual and collectivism, so you can really start seeing it is for how it is.
And that proves that as an individualist, we are given our freedom, and therefore others must have their freedom too. Yeah, this is absolutely fundamental to all of this.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
Responsibility to ourselves as well as to others. Now, the responsibility to ourselves is about the fact that you can't really function as a human being in society or in a community unless you've dealt with your own needs. Yeah, and this is in a way about our own health.
That's really critical, guys, right? It's that same thing. I remember I did a rafting course years ago, and what they said is you never jump in to rescue anyone else unless you're sure that you're going to survive and you have everything you require. Because if you go down, that's 2 of you down, right? So it's the same thinking. You can't be of any benefit to anyone else unless you are resourced enough to actually go in and take that, what it is that's required for you to give to someone else. So it's all about, you need to first fill yourself up. And if we're all full, then we can all give it our capacity. That's what he's pretty much saying.
It's not our physical health, just that. It's also about our mental health and our emotional health. You can't support other people effectively unless you've dealt with your own stuff and your own health and your own needs, getting into kind of like healing and trauma here. Okay, this is going to get quite deep tonight.
All right, so that's really critical, guys, because that's how we're controlled, is through trauma. And that Communist Manifesto that most people think, is their freedom, right? Because how do you write your freedom down? You can't. It's how you experience it. All you can do is write the mental construct that gets people to believe that their freedom can be granted to them and that it can be protected by what's on paper. That's the trick. And then once you accept that, then you have masters. Because if we're all equal, who gets the right to write down what you are or are not allowed to do if we're all equal? So these are the principles that are really critical. That's why we do the hidden knowledge stuff, because it's about getting back to principle. And if you don't understand principle, there is no universal place where you can all meet on that which we can all discover, which is self-evident. If we don't have principle, we've only got biases and prejudices, and when you've got that, you've got loneliness, you've got fragmentation, and you've got conflict and violence. And that's why I asked you, how many people actually really enjoy seeing someone else thrive? Or do they see that as a threat to their own experience, right? That just shows you how deeply programmed we are to be divided. Because I've not seen it. I've not seen people really get a rush out of other people doing well, because they don't see themselves in the other. And if we were living in a society that was free, we would enjoy each other's successes because their success is our success. We'd understand their failure is our failure. That's the true understanding of living through an individualist perspective, is that everything's connected. That you can't do anything alone. That's why only through individual voluntary contribution can abundance happen. And that's what he was talking about. Well, I think he's going to get to that actually.
So voluntary action is all about what it is when we co-create with others, okay? And it makes us feel good. It only makes us feel good when it's voluntary. So when you interact with others in a group, it's when you do it under your own volition, it's fantastic. Because a few of you have come together and you're working together as a team and you're producing more than the sum of its parts. It's like when you trade and just two people trade. Yeah, it's not just benefit. It's not like 2 + 2 and you get 4. It's like 2 + 2 and you get like 50. Yeah, it's when two people come together. They're sort of the benefit of working together or trading together or whatever it is. You get this amplification effect, synergistic effect. Yeah, and that is the abundance that comes together when individuals come together voluntarily as individuals. Yeah. As opposed to being coerced in a group.
So think about what that fake constitution does. Does it not set punishments for what's going to happen to you if you don't comply with what they tell you is the right thing to do? Is that not coercion? So you've got all these people, right? And Tim Dwyer's just one of them. But you've got people like Rod Cullerton, Wayne Glue, Dick Yardley, Mike Holt, the Know Your Rights crew, Darren Dixon. I mean, there's a bunch of them. You know, that warrior at law, Zeb Freeman. All of them still think that this is common law and that's what they'll tell you. Now, common law, if you fully understand it, it's got everything to do with individual rights and nothing to do with collectivism, because collectivism is communism. Now, how many people know that Soviet Russia had a constitution? And they too ran the same exact play, where they got to dictate what the rights were. No different. Funny about that. But see, people don't understand the principles behind things, and then that's how they get sucked in, and then they fight for this. They keep saying that we're in a communist experience right now, and then, you know, it was only in 1973 and 86 that we had some bad apples. Hello, look at that, what it says, and we're going to get to it at the end of this, and we're going to show you what's actually really written as to how they control us from day one, and how they fund the whole collectivist structure. So here we go. What does it say? The legislative powers of parliaments. If you saw at the beginning what powers they gave themselves, like a small cabal of ruling class gave themselves this power by usurping a system of service and turning it into a domination structure, right? And most people didn't know that because they voted for it. Like I said, it was a corporate decision. You had the choice of either get it or don't get it. That's pretty much what people are facing. And so the Parliament shall subject to this Constitution have power, shall subject to this Constitution. So now it's saying, because it's written down, this ritual that we've written onto paper now, that now gives us the power to make laws for peace and order. Now, how does your public servant get to decide that? That's not a servant. That's your master. Really, really important to understand it. And good government, so that means good control of the Commonwealth with respect to trade and commerce. Now, what did Will just talk about? How does trade and commerce really work? Is it by having someone tell you and use coercion to create abundance? Or is that a way to strip our life force energy from us and then use that to fund more tyranny? Now, what does it say about taxation? Look at that. But so as to not discriminate between the states. So they get the right to actually tax you, forcibly use violence to coerce you to pay and fund being violated. You think about that. That's what that is. So we're just going to have a look at something else. It's very few people have ever looked at taxation this way. So now I'm going to bring this into your consciousness and see how this lands. Taxation is not merely theft, robbery, and extortion. Taxation is slavery. To be continually compelled by threat of legal force to surrender the products of your labour is functionally and morally indistinguishable from being forced to provide your labour itself. Best mind trick on the planet, guys, because what's the first thing you ever hear? You hear the two certainties in life are death and taxes. So they've imprinted that in your mind, that that's a virtuous experience. To assert a higher claim than the fruits of another man's work and exchanges is to implicitly declare a higher claim of ownership to the man himself. To designate the man as your chattel, as your productive livestock to be exploited in the pursuit of your ends. There you have it, guys. Argue away all you like. I haven't seen an argument that actually explains this in a different way. So if you reckon this is bunk, please come forward with your actual arguments in substance, not the classic defamation of character because you don't like what you're hearing, right? That's not what this is about. Because if you do that, it means you've got no legs to stand on. So, you've got an issue with it, come forward. Show your case. That's how it works.
Yeah, and the modern version, yeah, we're not being literally whipped and forced to labor for somebody else. Well, we're part-time forced to labor for somebody else. That's what an income tax is. By the way, Frederick Douglass figured that out too.
And Frederick Douglass, he was a slave, an actual, the classic version. And so that's who he's talking about there. This is Larkin Rose. A lot of time for Larkin. He's done some critical work on really opening up people's minds to the true nature of truth. So yeah, he's just explaining slavery as well.
And ended up being more offended by the idea of an income tax where the master let him go work and let him keep a little bit of he produced, and he figured out this is literally worse than slavery. So when a former slave says that an income tax is literally worse than slavery, that's kind of impressive.
So there you have it, guys. Just wanted to finish there. This is all about jogging your minds to start thinking past those set limits that have been created for you, not to see the truth as it is. And so if that's what you've come here for, there'll be something of value. But I've still got a lot more videos to make on this subject. So yeah, I'll be back.